Hi, thanks everyone. It's great to be here. And exciting previous presentation by Fabian, and we're going to be on a panel together in a little while. So just looking to start my deck. Okay, great. All right. So I did want to just start by introducing myself a little bit. I guess I already had the intro. So just one comment is that I've been in the enterprise blockchain space for about 8 years now. The first 2 years at IBM, starting the IBM Blockchain Platform business and launching that. And then really feeling Web3 had a bigger vision for enterprise and leaving to start Kaleido with investment from one of the co-founders of Ethereum. So we're really looking to put a big easy button on top of adopting these technologies. So really best of breed open source that's ready for enterprise. Fabian was talking about a lot of like B2C type use cases, and obviously enterprises also look at B2B use cases as well. And there was a great panel by Siemens and Deutsche Telekom and SAP a little bit earlier talking about some of that and what they're looking to do. Over time, we started the initial enterprise protocols that were popular, and then we've added communities like Polygon and Avalanche and others. Very early, for one of the first adopters of Chainlink, IPFS, and others for enterprise as well. And we're all about running and managing and making the software easy to use. So how do we bring Web 2 online? Companies need someone to call when there's a bug in the open source, sort of the Red Hat model of you're using Linux, but you do need support for your team if your system is down. Just very plug and play like AWS, but for Web3, and that's the approach that seems to work really well. There's tons of companies who have been successful in production, and what we're really seeing is the beginning of a crossing of the chasm, both in these B2B industry ecosystems and use cases, as well as a lot of B2C use cases. For example, with NFTs, there's a lot of interest in how you can use NFTs as companies, whether to reach your consumers more or to really motivate and help your own employees with safety certifications. If you're in an industry where that's a consideration, you provide a lot of training that's important for your employees, or awards, micro-credentialing, things they can take with them when they leave your company. So because I only have about 15 minutes, and this is a very deep topic, I'm really focused on a few high-level business trends, but then tying it to what does this mean for developers and builders, since it seems that most of the people at the event are more on the technology side, and I thought that could be useful for them. So I think one thing to keep in mind, we're very, at Web3 events like this, focused on blockchain and the technology, digital assets. But more broadly, from an enterprise perspective, this really dovetails into a trend of digitally transforming, moving to the cloud, and this is something that COVID accelerated by a decade. So even the most conservative industries like healthcare, insurance, very paper-based, manual, are really realizing, we can't depend on having agents or brokers sitting in offices, giving people pieces of paper to sign, and we need to modernize how we work. So it's really once-in-a-generation lift and shift of some of these back-office systems and a replatforming that's happening. And of course, as they're trying to address all of the problems in these decades-old processes, they're looking at how blockchain can help, because when they do replatform, they want this to last for decades. And that was a comment made in the earlier enterprise panel as well, really looking at future-proofing what they're doing. So over the years, there's been a lot of innovation on the glass, but really with Web3, blockchain, it's the first time you could go all the way back to the system of record. And, really, from a B2B perspective, have that shared view of the logic, application logic, shared view of the data. And, in just one use case with some healthcare companies we work with, which are the largest providers in the US, that was a $2.1 million problem, just shared data around access to care. That they were able to use blockchain to help address, and have had, in that case, 500% ROI. So as I mentioned, there's really this traditional, initially enterprises were very much looking at B2B, but in recent years looking at B2C, or there's B2B to C, where you might, in the healthcare space example I was giving, start by making more clear and transparent data that's clean and accurate between the payers or providers, but then also opening that up to patients. So now they've got that transparency as well, and that's a problem in some countries like the US where we have a private system. And then there's, of course, reinventing whole new business models. So in some of the enterprise networks we see, they use things like enterprise stablecoins to help motivate and align incentives between all the players, because they operate in a completely decentralized way. So they want, it's like data monetization in this case, where you get paid for contributing good data, and then if you come and subscribe to the data, you have to pay for it. So what we've seen, and enterprise, in one of the earlier panels, they mentioned innovation teams and engineers and technologists inside of companies will see a lot of exciting things happening in the Web3 space and try to bring those innovations in. So first, it was really one use case, which was crypto, and that motivated development of certain technology. Then the next wave around DeFi, that attracted quite a bit of interest in the financial space. And then we're really moving into a third wave where you're looking at just NFTs to represent items and things like on a supply chain, digital twins, data and experiences, and there's a whole set of technologies that are powering thousands of use cases there. I guess just the last thought on the digital transformation point is that sometimes companies are doing these initiatives themselves and they can move pretty quickly. Sometimes you go sort of faster or further together as an industry. And this is actually a diagram that McKinsey had shared a number of years ago, just saying that these digital ecosystems were emerging. This was really not even taking into consideration the technology side of it, just the business side of it, that business is evolving to where it's the health of your network and your relationships that really matters, and that network you're part of is producing products. Some problems you need to solve, like one network that's been in production for a couple years that has 70% of the world's grain supply. It's just the supply chain portion of it was very expensive, and it was had a lot of costs, and it was something they had to fix together as an industry. Even though they're all competitors, they're doing this together because they need to improve their bottom line, and then they're innovating on top of that. So one second key takeaway I wanted to make is that there was a Gen 1 approach to building blockchains where people thought everything was the blockchain in this project, and it was really almost like hammer looking for a nail. And the reality is that blockchain is the beating heart of the solution and provides a lot of the differentiation and blockchain digital assets and the technologies associated with it. But the chain itself is only usually around 5% of the solution. So from an enterprise lens, you need to look at all the other layers now, and those layers need to be really reimagined for decentralized transactions with others that you're going to be interacting with, whether that's a more formal network or consortia, or it's how you're a solution provider and you're bringing this forward. So the blockchain is the beating heart, but you have a data layer, transaction, middleware, application layers. And then you still have BizOps, DevOps to think about, integrating with existing systems and sources of data, and then collaboration services. So as the space has matured, there's more and more technologies that have become available. A lot of times because of the token economics of Web3, you find a lot of individual solutions that are being built out, sort of point solutions that all have their flavor of differentiation. And there's a whole new tech stack that emerges, and then enterprises really are looking at the whole constellation of use cases they might want to be involved in. It could get pretty intimidating. So we actually heard from a gaming company that they were signing NDAs with 17 different vendors because they needed that little slice of the technology from each one. So there's a variety of technologies at the app layer, then infrastructure, and then a lot of the Gen 1 projects actually had very expensive consulting. So I was at the Avalanche Summit in Barcelona, and I made a comment that Gen 1 was 3 to 5 years for a use case and $30 to $50 million. And then the person said, that's exactly right. That's like, we spent that amount. I'm not going to give the exact amount, but it was in the range I gave. That was obviously is not what's going to bring the industry forward. So what we're finding is much more of a movement to product-based, plug-and-play, hardened pieces, very open source based. I'm on the board of Hyperledger, which is a great community, has a couple dozen projects, and just one of them I'm going to talk about actually has 1 million lines of code that's already secure, it's hardened, performant, and people can just pick up and use these pieces that all integrate and work together. So really enterprises are looking at those one-stop platforms. So you have your Web3 system of record, which then is almost like a brain that can control the state and then all of the different across the different networks and projects you're involved with. And then there's the infrastructure pieces of running that as well. So, and then, these companies, they might have many dozens of use cases, but to date, when they've been starting with that Gen 1 approach, they were just so focused on that one use case and getting that over the line, and again, it was expensive and took a long time, that moving to the Gen 2 approach gives them really the ability to now be looking at doing dozens of concurrent use cases. So this is one of the projects I was just mentioning that sits in Hyperledger. It's all the on and off chain interactions you need to integrate to existing Web 2 systems. Over 500 APIs, RESTful API based, so any application developer can work with this. You don't need Web 3 specific skills. And then you get the whole stack. Blockchain is an event-driven system, so really listening to what's happening on the blockchain. You have event streams coming off. You're able to reliably send transactions onto the chain, and this really helps with a lot of the performance and scaling issues, just Kafka-based queuing. And then the different workflows you might need between multi-party systems and private data exchange, and then a whole digital asset stack as well. So I encourage you, whoever's more on the technical side and developer, to take a look at this. And it's all from central bank digital currency projects with Swift to large healthcare companies, insurance companies, global conglomerates are using this to accelerate getting into production. So really that Gen 2 approach of adopting Web3 with plug and play, very hardened, and all based on open source. This is not a token-based sort of approach. So in terms of like paying a fee, gas for transactions, et cetera, this really sits above the chain. And it can connect to any blockchain. So whether it's your favorite public chain, or layer 2 or layer 3, that it's agnostic. And so this helps with future proofing as well. So we've seen people who start more on a Gen 1 approach, some of the original enterprise chains, and then say, we need digital assets, we need tokens in our use case, and they can really seamlessly move, and it's a developer sprint to just swap out the blockchain ledger you're using underneath. So third point I'll make is really the rise of app chains, and this is tied to I guess a little bit of what I'm saying about the first generation of the projects were expensive and took the private approach, but they even ran into challenges moving from just POCs to pilots to production. So how could you accelerate that innovation process and be more agile? It's really about proof of value of the use case and then getting the right stakeholders aligned. But of course, enterprises have a unique set of requirements around performance and scalability, and then just integrating with their own systems, regulations and compliance. And then, predictability around transaction processing as well. The industry over decades has been trying to drive down the cost of transaction processing. So taking that consideration in as well. So where do app chains come in? A lot of times people in the early days was like public versus private, and that's not the case anymore. There's really been this convergence. There's a whole spectrum of chains depending on what that enterprise is doing. They might have that private or consortia type chain. They might be using public in other situations. And then subnets, supernets, those sorts of approaches have become very popular, where the public chains are saying they do need a little more performance or scale or some privacy or permissioning. But the private chains are saying we still want to be able to interoperate with public ecosystems. So if you're like a gaming company, going back to that example, And you decide, I'm going to represent all the in-game assets in my game with NFTs. So you might have millions, minted daily. So those, you'd want low gas or no gas sort of transactions for that. But some of those NFTs will be valuable enough that players will want to exit those maybe to another game in your portfolio, if you're a very large gaming ecosystem, or to NFT exchanges like OpenSea, et cetera. So I guess sort of getting to recap, enterprises need that easy button, very easy to use. There's all sorts of cool projects that are emerging in the space, which I'm happy to talk about afterwards because I'm running out of time. And, but still always enterprise grade deployments, HA, DR, SOC 2 Type 2, all of that. If you guys know what that, if you live in that space, you'll know. And yeah, just need to be compliant, performant, securable, and scalable. But still looking for that easy button with a great user experience for developers. Thanks, everyone. I'm happy to talk more afterwards.